Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Why the Best HR Tech is All About the Wider Ecosystem. My name's David Richter and I'm the Director of Marketing at the Cipher Group. For those of you who don't know Cipher and are not familiar with us, if we just move on to the next slide, the Cipher is a specialist provider of online HR learning, payroll and recruitment software through our HCM platform, Cipher Connect. And the thing that sets Cipher Connect apart is that we don't just provide seamless integration across our own suite of software, but we integrate with specialist solutions across the wider people management ecosystem. And that's really a message that we've been championing for quite a few years now, sort of since the time really when, if you were to ask an HR professional what's one of the main criteria you're looking for from your people management solutions, their response would often be, it all needs to come from the same supplier. And obviously the world has moved on quite a bit from that time. So I'm really, really pleased to be joined today by Sven Elbert, who's the Senior Analyst at the Fosway Group. Fosway Group are Europe's leading HR industry analyst, and also Megan Hope, Cipher's Partner Manager. Megan's going to be on hand to answer any questions you have specifically about Cipher's partner ecosystem and our connectivity to those specialist solutions. So a very warm welcome to both of you.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you, David. Ladies first.
For the audience, please do send in your questions during the webinar via the control panel on your screen. We've made a couple of resources available to you, which you can download from that control panel, and it explains a bit more about Cipher's APIs and our partner ecosystem. And if you do miss anything throughout the webinar, not to worry. Everyone who's registered for the webinar will receive a link tomorrow where you can view an on-demand version that you can watch at any time. Before I hand over to Sven, we're going to run a very quick poll. Let me just get the poll up on the screen. And the poll is approximately how many technology solutions do you have integrated with your central HR solution? And Sven, whilst we're waiting for people to give their responses, can you sort of give some input about your experience? I guess there's probably quite a range that you might expect for people to respond to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, it depends a little bit also on the the company and the size of how many employees, how global they are, those kind of things. But definitely, there's a lot of companies who have quite a few integrations, and if you think about it carefully, then you might discover a few more than you like normally think of. So I would say probably 5 is quite a common number. In very large organizations, you find ridiculously high numbers. So, and obviously we can talk a little bit about consolidating that into one suite a little bit more here and there, but definitely HR is quite an ecosystem oriented solution as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And Megan, to bring you in, it'd be good to get your thoughts on this as well. What's your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, following on from what Sven said, it is always relative to the number of systems or technologies that are in place at the organization. So, and that's going to be bigger if an organization is enterprise size, but we would always expect there to be several just out of necessity. For example, even just one with payroll, that's a really integral part of the HR solution. So yeah, would hopefully everybody would have at least 1 or 2, but we can definitely help people if they are in that none category as well.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Well, I'm going to close the poll now. We've had a good number of responses. You can see the results up on your screen. And actually quite surprised at how many people have said that actually there is currently no integration between the central HR solutions and other technologies that they use in their organizations. And I think it is very much weighted towards the lower end of that scale. So thank you very much, everyone, for your input. We're going to run another poll during the webinar, which is going to be related to this, and it'll be interesting to see what your results are from that. But in the meantime, Sven, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. So just making sure you can still see my slides.
Yeah,
hopefully.
All looks good.
Yeah, yep. Wonderful. So a little bit about Fosway, just a couple of words. Obviously, we are an industry analyst firm. We're focusing on HR topics alone and solely. Company has been founded in 1996, so 25 years back now. And we are really looking at corporate research in depth with, topics around learning, talent management, talent acquisition, next generation HR. And also we provide or we look at the software market particularly through a European lens. So working with a lot of European headquartered organizations, but also international multinationals or corporates, I think is what sets us apart in the analyst space. And you would also find a lot of, our free market commentary and a lot of the vendor research, for example, on our website. We've done some, COVID-related research on the impact of that on the HR market, and we are really running a lot of research and surveys to understand how the realities really look like for HR and for the different functions within HR. So whether that's learning or talent, we always dive deep into those spaces. And for today, really, we've kind of structured this presentation into 4 bigger sections. In the first one, we will be looking at how COVID is transforming the role of HR and how it's been impacting HR priorities. Obviously, it's been throwing long shadows into 2021. Maybe a little bit of brighter light on the horizon in some countries than in others, and you will notice my German accent here. Basically, definitely something where COVID has impacted HR. Obviously, a lot of compliance changes with around furloughing staff, where people had to react, obviously managing, working from home. So there's a lot of things we will cover in this section. And then as things have gone more and more digital during this time, also companies are using HR tech more widely and have even digitized more processes. If you think about video interviewing or onboarding, those kind of processes needed to go digital. And we want to talk about the ecosystem, so the interplay of these solutions and how they exist within, with different connectors between them. And the ecosystem term is from the biology, so we thought it would be a good idea to maybe look at what can we learn actually from biology and transfer that into the HR tech space. So I think that's a bit of an interesting spin there. And then we are looking at basically integrations, connectors, and marketplaces, and what's the difference between them, and basically then how you can assess your vendor solutions and their ability to support you, in a dynamic ecosystem, because obviously there are sometimes systems you want to change or replace or expand, and obviously then you need to have a vendor who can deal with this in a very robust way. So I think please do ask questions in the chat. We'll have some time at the end definitely to cover them. And if you see something, during the presentation, then please ask it immediately. Okay, so moving into the first section here, COVID obviously has put significant challenges out there for all of the organizations, no matter in which camp you really are in. If you're on the winning side or a little bit more on the losing side, then obviously there's different impacts. On average, on an aggregated view, we've been asking this question year over year, and the top 3 this year in terms of the business challenges that were most significant for organizations, we've seen some changes, obviously. So on the top number 1 position, increasing organization performance and profitability is still on number 1. That's still on the minds of HR leaders as well today. But obviously new this year is overcoming the impact of the pandemic. And with the economic turmoil that we're in, basically also a lot of companies have said that reducing operation costs is more significant, and that has gone up most significantly to number 3 here. And these two have, so the number 2 and 3 have replaced business agility, which is on number 4, which has gone down a little bit. But it's also a topic that a lot of organizations have been discussing and speaking about, and you can see it a lot these days, where people are thinking, how can I be faster with my products to market? How can I be faster to market with my products? And this is actually the topic that most organizations see as at least a minor challenge, if not a major challenge. So definitely something where, during the pandemic, this has probably even accelerated a lot of buying decisions. We found that, a lot of organizations that were quite mature in their HR digitization were also able to cope much better with the pandemic. What the pandemic has done, on the other hand, is definitely provided the HR leadership with a much more assertive position in the leadership team of the organization. So here we've asked, how much more are you able to take an assertive seat in leading decision making? With people working from home, obviously HR had a lot of facets about understanding people's moods and opinions, how it is to work from home, and we have specific tools to do surveys, for example, and that has obviously how many people are furloughed, how can I return to work, what is our plan there, how can we have people return to work, what information do we need, if they are sick, how can we make sure that we know in which shifts they worked with whom, how can we contact trace them. So those are all things that have given this HR a better seat at the table. What we then ask, what are the top priorities as an organization at the moment? So here we are still seeing that facilitating the digital transformation of the workforce is still quite high up there. It's here on number 1, shared with adopting next-gen HR approaches. And with obviously COVID having shifted a lot of the demand from consumers to digital, a lot more organizations also need to digitize their products and services. So the demand for digital skills and digital savvy people is obviously increasing, and how that is impacting the workforce in terms of reskilling and upskilling initiatives is all falling, I think, under this point here, number 1. And then obviously a lot of new next generation HR approaches have come to mind. We are talking a lot about internal mobility, skills being the next big thing at the moment. So how can we make sure we have maybe some modern HR technology in place that is actually suited for the modern workforce? And what do we need to do to also get more agile, promote employee experience in a better way? And I think those are the things that people are looking at under this point. And then some of the evergreens, obviously leadership and management. With people working from home, there's a lot of focus on this topic as well. How can you educate leaders who lead in a socially distanced environment? Obviously a lot of learning initiatives going on, coaching initiatives going on in that space, which brings us to being a learning organization and consistently innovating as well. And then last but not least, in number 5 here, improving the engagement of employees, because sometimes they feel a little bit distant. They maybe get only, the things from their own department. And how do you really connect them? How do you keep in touch with them when they're working from home and make sure that they're productive? So those are a lot of the topics that are on the mind of HR right now. And then basically, HR technology is playing really a very big role in this, right? So, collaboration tools, Teams, Zoom meetings, everybody's now online and meeting virtually all the time. And basically, many organizations have also introduced some new solutions to be able to cope with that. I know of some cases where an organization didn't have an HR system, a global one with 30,000 employees, and they just, as the pandemic hit and everything went into lockdown, they weren't able to communicate with their people globally. They didn't know really how to reach the people in the factories internationally. And so they introduced both a communications platform, but also an HR system. And they've really gone live with a small core of like the core data set that you need to fuel the communications tool in the first place, but rolled it out in just like 4 weeks, where normally you find multi-month projects. When you introduce new core HR solutions, they really sped these things up. And here we asked really how standardized are the HR systems in your organization. So this already leads us a little bit into the ecosystem discussion, and can you have everything in one system? and how much can you standardize them. And this chart, we're also tracking this for quite a few years now, and the number of organizations who have standardized their HR technology stack is increasing over time. So we are now at 42%, where this is very standardized. I wouldn't be surprised if next year or so we would be at around 50%, or the year after maybe. So definitely seeing more standardization coming, but there's still a lot of organizations where this is not standardized. And why is that? I think it's actually quite a European-centric problem, right? Because organizations, in order to scale their business, they need to internationalize really early on. And this means oftentimes they will acquire a business, and it's really multiple local businesses that you always want to kind of get together, working very well, and get the synergies. But from an HR perspective, that means you have local payroll systems, you have maybe multiple HR systems in the various countries. So for European headquartered organizations, standardization has always been historically a little bit more difficult than maybe for companies that are headquartered in the US and are coming from that side, and just putting that one HR system into the countries that they go into as they grow and expand. Yeah, so obviously the other question then that we had was around, has the pandemic affected the importance of consolidating your solutions into one single suite? And 51% said there's no change, so no significant change. Basically means, if you have it very standardized, like the 42% on the slide before, obviously, you might already have arrived at that point, but still for 42%, the importance of consolidating has actually increased. So seeing more and more companies looking to bring things together, and the advantages, are pretty apparent. You get better reporting, you get usually a better user experience because it's all coming from a single UI. So that's what a lot of organizations are gunning for. But then you would find that sometimes maybe the HR system is not sophisticated enough. And that's why we at Fosway always say that we should think of HR really as an ecosystem, never as one system only, because first of all, you exist in the wider corporate ecosystem. So there's obviously sales and finance and these kind of things. So you need to have connections to other systems as well. But also there's, like, with the movement to the cloud, there's interesting options out there. And if you only look at maybe recruiting, you would find that you today are maybe also integrating or using LinkedIn, for example, or you're posting your job ads on job boards. Learning technology is moving into curating content from the internet and getting that onto the front page of people who are interested in following a particular topic and learning about that. So basically, there's a lot of integration points, market salary data. There's a lot of things. And so we've basically put this all into our Hcr model, which looks at three basically different areas. You see the hexagons in the middle, the dark blue middle ring of the 6 hexagons is all the people operations and people management functionality around managing people, managing the organization, payroll, workforce management, shift planning, those kind of things, time and attendance, leave, absence. And then on the outer layer of the 6 hexagons, you find all the talent-related processes from recruiting, learning, mobility, career management, performance and feedback, engagement being an important topic, obviously since the pandemic, and reward and recognition. So really looking at those areas surrounding it. And then obviously there's the enterprise context where you have maybe a BI tool that you use to consolidate, a business intelligence tool that you use to consolidate the data from both your HR system or systems and maybe your sales or finance systems to do interesting and more deeper analytics. Obviously, an intelligence layer, artificial intelligence being an important one. So you may have some enterprise components that you want to link into here as well. And obviously, integrations is a key part of that as well. Okay, so as you know, probably some HR functions have been faster to the cloud. So for recruiting and onboarding, you know, the need to integrate with other things is something that is in the market happening already for 15 years, right? Some other areas like learning, it's maybe not as a long history. So they have just recently maybe moved into integrating with other tools. I mean, virtual classrooms are around for quite a long time, and so are authoring systems. But when you think of content curation or chatbot support, you know, those are fairly new technologies. And these kind of markets are moving a bit slower than maybe the recruiting thing. But so depending on the vendor and where they come from, they have developed a more or less sophisticated approach to orchestrate this ecosystem and basically have different sophistication in the integration. And we'll cover a little bit more about some of the technical details. But the good news is a lot of the vendors have actually put a lot of their R&D investment into this to make it easier for HR, you know, to adopt these things and get these things working together in a easier, much easier fashion than it used to be, for example, like 15 years ago, where it was more manual to connect a job board, whereas today you have even a platform that maybe distributes it to, you know, thousands of job boards, right, internationally. Okay, our study then asked basically also about the highest priority of disruption over the next 12 months. So what are the areas, you know, we talked a little, or there was this notion of next-gen HR approaches being, you know, one of the top priorities for HR these days. And then what are maybe the topics in that? And here we've seen that skills and competencies are really high up. Learning and talent development, number 2, performance management still there. Recruiting talent acquisition has gone down compared to last year. Obviously, some companies not hiring much in last year, and also moving into this year, it's probably a bit slower. So we've seen some changes in this, but I think the skills piece is probably in all the conversations we are currently having as analysts with both corporates and vendors, the topic that we hear and talk the most about, because there's some really innovative stuff going on in that kind of field at the moment. And it has helped basically organizations to, you know, to cope better with the pandemic. The approach here is also a little bit around internal mobility, where you were able, if, for example, your business in one area of the business, maybe in one business unit fell apart and the demand had gone away, but in another division you had a stronger and increased demand for your products and services, then obviously the question was, how can we shift people across? And that is obviously something where you need to look into skills much more deeply. And that's why this topic here is quite high up in that. Okay, David, should we move to the next poll question?
Okay, great, thank you very much, Sven. So I'll just launch the poll now. Actually, it's a very similar question to last time, but there's a subtle difference. So this question is approximately how many technologies does your organization use that would benefit from integrating with your people management solutions? I've got a typo there. You can see it's an important question because I've added 2 question marks. Brilliant. Anyway, the subtle difference is the first poll was about how many active integrations do you currently have. This one is more focused on how many different solutions do you have that would benefit from an integration. Megan, I'll start with you. It'd be good to get your thoughts and experiences of customers that you've worked with at Cipher and the number of systems they've identified as potentially benefiting from integrating with their people management data.
Yeah, so anecdotally, a while ago, one of our customers, the Natural History Museum, did a review of all of the systems that they had in place across the whole organisation, and sort of mapped them all. And there was about 80 different systems used for a whole host of different purposes, as Sven was going, went through there with the Fosway model. So it's firstly about understanding all of those systems that you've got, but then drilling down to see actually is there value or is there purpose in us integrating or sharing data between them. So we wouldn't probably expect there to be 80 integrations for every single system, or definitely not at the start. But when you do then do that mapping and then begin to understand more about each system, undoubtedly we would expect that people would think actually, yeah, there would be benefit in integrating some form of data between systems, and also just widening out what an integration could be as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be every single piece of data, but is there value in sharing something really?
Yeah, absolutely right. And it doesn't need to be just integrating with other people management systems. It can be, I mean, it can be finance, accounting, CRM, or even just kind of mundane stuff like car park access. But it's still beneficial to
Yeah,
reducing admin
absolutely.
for the HR teams.
Absolutely.
I've just put the results from the second poll up on the screen. There's a bit of a disparity, which I think we'd probably have expected. Just to cast everyone's minds back to the results of the original poll, it was nearly 40% of people said they currently had no integrations with their people management systems and other solutions. And again, a similar amount, 38% said that they had between 1 and 2. You can see that it is skewed in favor of the higher number of potential integrations. So it'd be maybe a good idea to get your thoughts on what it is that's preventing people from realizing these integrations if they can perceive that there would be a benefit.
Yeah, so it's technical savviness, and I think maybe also capabilities of some of the solutions to integrate with other systems in an easy kind of way. And I think I have a slide later where it says the HR solutions from a functional perspective, what we're seeing in our market study, we're running an annual survey on HCM solutions every year. And what we're seeing that the functional difference between the solutions is getting smaller and smaller. So, performance management process, you can take this one or that one, and they won't, be that much different from a technology perspective and what functionalities they support. However, on the integration side, they are quite different solutions out there. So some who are putting more effort into that, and then there's others who leave you, a little bit standing in the rain, if you like, to integrate with other systems. And my answer to the poll question would have been 11 or more, because it's almost every technical HR system has some user management, right? So on a CRM, your Salesforce, they are all staff, right? So how do you get them into the user management of the CRM system? Well, you can do a data feed from your HR solution, and you probably only need like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields, like the manager, the name, the email address, or whatever. And it's not that you need to kind of that you have to push sales data back and forth. That's not that's not necessary, even if there would be maybe some benefit to evaluate some of the objectives or whatever. But even that core integration is something which would go into almost any system where you have a lot of employees working with that kind of system. So collaboration tools for sure, CRM is a good example. Help desk systems, it's all sorts of systems that would benefit from those kind of integrations, really.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep. So and even in the mid-market, I think if it's mid-sized organizations as well. However, these organizations don't have that much IT staff to actually work on these integrations. In very large organizations, you find entire departments who just do that kind of stuff in the IT team departments. For mid-sized organizations, that's obviously a little bit less the case. So here you need to really rely on some of the standard connectors, which almost leads us into the third section. But let's go to the second one maybe first, which was this. Oops. Can you see the slide still?
Yeah, I can see the slide.
Yeah.
You can see learning from biology.
I have now my yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, basically what can we learn from biology here? When you Google about ecosystem, HR ecosystem or recruiting ecosystem or whatever, what you would find typically is a big slide with bubbles around functional areas. For recruiting, you would find, I don't know, job distribution, and then you'd have a circle with all the specialized providers in job distribution that you can look at, whether that's Broadbean, eQuest, or something like that. You would find CRM systems on there. You would find interview management solutions, and so on and so on. But if we look at biology, this is not an ecosystem. This is, strictly speaking, only a community. So in biology, a community is all the animals that you have basically in the zoo, right? So, and you have basically then, like in biology, as you're well aware, you have plants produce who produce things, and then you have herbivores who basically eat the plants, and then you have predators who eat herbivores, or predators who eat predators, and then you have to decompose. So if we take that across to your HR ecosystem, you might have some solutions that could actually eat some of your other solutions. So if you're thinking of your HR suite and that comes with an integrated payroll engine, you could consider replacing your payroll system, your current one, from a different vendor with that HCM solution, for example, if you had both, right? So you have these predator relationships. You also have maybe some symbiotic relationships where there's two vendors who are quite well aligned, who work very well together, and who, by working together, they create an additional benefit for each other and for you as a customer. So I think that's an interesting observation where we can learn from, like, look at the players in the ecosystem and the relationships in the community and the relationships between them, and what role they really play in terms of the predator or symbiotic relationship. So then the question is, what is an ecosystem really? So in biology, an ecosystem is basically the community, but you then put it, hello? Can you see my slides still? Yeah,
I can still see you.
Yeah, good. So now I don't know, so basically an ecosystem then shows you or looks at the surrounding variables, the environment, everything that is non-living. So whether that's how many stones there are for the herbivores to hide under, right? So that would be something. Or how many water is available. If you put a penguin in a desert, then obviously they would have a bit of a struggle there. If you put them on a mountain, it might still be cold, but they're still not able, to get the food. So it's definitely something where you need to look at the animals in their non-living environment, and that is what we in biology call an ecosystem. If we transfer this to HR technology, then you can think of the community, and you can take this model or other models, but you can basically think of it as the members in your community. So maybe your recruitment solution, or your learning and development solution, or your engagement solution, and your core HR system. Or if you have just one system, then it's maybe just modules, right? But what also matters is the context of your organization. So is it a large organization that's using the system? Is it maybe someone in public sector? Then obviously they will have completely different requirements on how they do performance evaluations, on how they pay people. Those kind of things are different between these types of organizations. Smaller organizations, startups, have widely different requirements than a large enterprise with 300,000 employees, right? So obviously the technology needs to fit to that particular environment. If you're working in retail, for example, or with a lot of blue-collar workers, then obviously that has an impact on how much weight you need to put on optimizing your workforce and the spend that comes alongside it. So that has a magnificent influence factor. Your HR operating model has a significant influence there as well. So are you looking to a very agile, adaptive, resilient environment? Are you using still a more multi-country kind of approach, where one HR person looks after multiple countries, for example? Do you have like a service center of excellence kind of approach with 3 pillars? So those are definitely things to take into consideration, and they are very, very important when you're making those buying decisions, and when you think about how to optimize your technology stack in HR, right? And so why is this important? Because coming back to the slide where we looked at, how many have a standardized HR ecosystem or have standardized the HR solutions, then HCM centered is probably the approach that most of HR people are gunning for, right? But it's not necessarily the most successful one, for depending on the environment that your organization exists in. So if you're a mid-sized organization and you're not looking for Ferrari kind of stuff, then that's definitely a very, very good and valid approach. If you are, however, maybe more in this retail space, then obviously shift plan or manufacturing, then shift planning is much, much more important, and optimizing the time of your staff and managing the costs surrounding that. Then maybe a workforce-centered approach is much better. Here you would emphasize some of the components in a much stronger way. So the shift planning, the absence management are becoming much, much more important, whereas some other components are maybe not as important, as you're also looking at a different workforce here, right? The other way around, if it's more knowledge-based worker kind of workforce that you have. So here, maybe a talent-centered approach is a bit more viable, where you can leave maybe some of the payroll systems that you have in place running, but you're really focusing more on optimizing your approach to performance, your approach to learning, and making sure that you can staff projects very efficiently and quickly with the right people at the right time. So that obviously has a big difference. And the fourth category that we're seeing, and all of these can be successful, is best of breed centered. So here you're basically cherry picking the best solution for each of the areas. So you're picking the Ferrari if you want to go very fast, and maybe the Volvo if you want it very secure and reliable, right? So you're picking the best transportation device to get from A to B in the most convenient way. And however, that then poses the challenge of, well, now we have so many apps, how can we get that a little bit unified? And then your focus will also be on the outer layers, on this enterprise context, where you might need to build your own employee experience layer, a bit of your own portal in front of all these solutions, your own analytics, because that cannot sit in each of these solutions, because you want it obviously to look across those kind of things. So we've seen organizations working successfully with either of those. Of course, it's probably in the mid-market, it's probably a bit more weighted towards HCM centered or workforce centered, depending on the type of organization. But I think it was worth pointing this out, because that obviously influences your vendor options quite significantly. And sometimes we find, particularly in a workforce-centered environment, that you just look for the one of the top tier 1 kind of HCM solutions, and you're not really able to then do your shift planning in a very sophisticated way, and you're losing lots and lots of pounds on that side, right? So yeah, with all the models, you definitely want a single source of truth, right? So you want to make sure that you have that you're able to report on your FTE in your annual reports, for example. So for that, you really have to arrive at a single source of truth for your HR data, and you need to consolidate it. And we find 4 different ways and models of doing this, and they're here depicted on the slide. The primary, if your cloud HR suite is at the center, then obviously you might want to integrate to one payroll solutions. If you're operating across multiple countries, then you might have multiple payroll solutions. but also maybe to your time and attendance or shift planning system if it's separate, or your service delivery system. So these are just examples. You could also put performance or recruiting suite in there if you had multiple systems there. So here what you wanted was you would maintain all your core employee and core organizational data in the Cloud HR suite, and you would surface that data out to these other systems so that you would not have to duplicate data entry in all of these systems, but you would automatically feed them with data from your Cloud HR suite, which obviously reduces the admin effort for HR significantly, right? Second model would be to have the Cloud HR suite function as a replica. So here, you're basically saying, okay, whenever I add an employee, I first add them in the payroll system, and then I take them across into the Cloud HR suite. So this can work, but it also has some particular struggles, because what if somebody moves from one payroll legislation to the other and is occurring in two payroll systems? So here you need to have like a globally unique identifier in order to kind of bridge some of the problems that arise with a replication model. In the hybrid space, you're saying basically, okay, I want to be quite flexible. I might have some payroll systems that I can't replace immediately. I want to keep them in place. So here, maybe I enter the data first in the payroll system and take it into the suite. And then in other scenarios, you might put the Cloud HR suite as the leading system and then surface the data into your local payrolls, maybe in smaller countries. In your long tail, that might be an option. So that would be the hybrid model. And finally, and that's probably the best model, is where you actually sync up the data. So wherever you make a change in a payroll system, it's automatically translated to the suite. Or if you make a change to the data in the suite, it's automatically translating to all the systems that are connected, right? So, and obviously there's different shades of gray between syncing and hybrid. You could think of some mix of the models here, but I think ultimately what you're gunning for is really to get that to that consolidated core of HR data, so that you would at least know who's working in your offices and factories at any given point in time, and that you would be able to communicate with your staff, with a digital solution, for example, right? So this is very, very central to get to solving that core HR data problem. Yeah, and as I said, maybe already alluded to a little bit earlier, HR exists not in a silo. Yeah, there's a wider biosphere of corporate systems where you have touch points. So from payroll, obviously, you need to get the data across to finance, but also there's lots of touch points to sales when it comes to our order intake that has an impact on resource and capacity planning, that might have an impact on your recruiting strategy, those kind of things. IT services, obviously, when you onboard people, you want to make sure that you have their laptops, their technology equipment ready on day one or even before. So there's a lot of, they might want to go to the procurement systems directly and e-procure some of those devices maybe themselves. So there's definitely a lot of touch points here to the wider corporate IT infrastructure, but also a lot of external touch points. And we've covered a few of them, but there's obviously a lot more, like background or reference checks when you're hiring people, identity verification or bank account verification, even when you think about compliance and making sure that you have all those checks in place and verified really that you're paying the person that you have on contract and not somebody else. That has obviously some important implications to compliance as well, with the Modern Slavery Act, for example, but also maybe some currency exchange rates you want to import, or some market salary data you want to make visible. So there's lots and lots of external touch points. And that's the good thing, I guess, in the cloud, where you can connect these systems in a much easier fashion than it was possible in this older on-premise world, where you really hadn't much connectivity out of your own data center, really. Okay, so Yeah, I think this is what I mentioned already a little bit earlier, but the ecosystem is becoming more and more a very important differentiator of these HCM suites, as they are, from a functional perspective, getting closer and closer together. So definitely when you select a system or when you consider replacing or expanding, look to that ecosystem. We are finding that a lot of organizations, are a bit light touch in their evaluation of the ecosystem options or the integration options. And I think that is something where more effort should be put on this particular path because of both the costs that can be associated with that. It can also have, quite an compliance, from a compliance perspective, quite an important risk if you don't get that right, that you have maybe data privacy issues if data is surfaced to someone who shouldn't see something, that they, who sees something that they actually shouldn't see. So those are some of the things definitely here to consider when you evaluate your vendor options. But then how can you tell the difference between these buzzwords? So I'm trying, HR is maybe not as technical, so giving you a bit of the basic vocabulary so that you can actually look a little bit at what the vendors are telling you, and so that you can verify this a little bit easier. And what you will often hear is, oh, we have an integration, it's simple plug and play. We have a marketplace, we have connectors, and what's really the difference? So if you think about, your little son or daughter, if they're in school, then they will, experiment with electricity themselves, right? They will do all the wiring themselves to get a light bulb to light up. And that's basically what you do in integration. You connect things that then work together to build something more sophisticated that is actually better, and you're getting additional value from it. So here you have to do the wiring all by yourself. Whereas if you have a connector, it's really much more plug and play. You can just plug it in and then hit the light switch and it's already done. The marketplace then is really something where you actually find predefined connectors and integrations, and you can basically connect to multiple things, multiple different things, and that makes it obviously easier than to combine things together in your ecosystem. So vendors will often tell you about the APIs and how easy it is, but is it really? And it's important to understand the differences behind these buzzwords, and then basically be able to understand also what kind of technical options are sitting in the background. So there's 4 main ones that I think some of you might already be familiar with. So obviously a text file export or import is one option. An API integration is another option, where you have an application programming interface. Basically, you have 2 vendors and they both provide endpoints, but you have to build the wiring between these endpoints yourself. Then you have a standard connector. Here, the vendors have already built the bridge between their systems and connected it. And then you have maybe a white label partnership where you might not even see that you're working with a third-party solution, because it's just all integrated into the UI, and the data flow is already pre-built from the vendor side. So how are they different? Basically, some of them are real-time. The latter 3 are real-time, and the CSV text file is basically a nightly thing. And it can be okay, right? You don't necessarily have to have a real-time integration with everything, because how often does your organizational structure change? Those things happen usually at the beginning of the month. The payroll runs at the end of the month. So there's obviously certain cases where maybe a monthly upload is quite sufficient, right? Whereas in other scenarios, you actually might really want a more real-time integration, but then CSV and text file imports might not be the right solution for you, right? Also, when you are looking at a large amount of data, so if you really have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of millions of records, then you might consider, just for speed purposes, that a CSV or text file import is actually much more efficient than an API call where you really where each data package is more or less traveling individually across, and that takes obviously a little bit longer time for the technology to process it. And also, the good side of a connector is that it's plug and play, but the downside is if you want something which is a little bit different, then that's really not possible. So if you need something which is a bit more tailor-made, if you can't really use the connector to do the thing you want it to do, then obviously you need to be able to customize it a little bit, and then you're back to the API integration. Excuse me. So don't assume that your vendor marketplaces provide these standard connectors only. On the marketplaces, you find usually white label partnerships, you find standard connectors, and you find API integrations. So really look at what it is really that you're getting when you're interested in a particular integration, whether that's an API integration, standard connector, or white label partnership. And some vendors on the API integration, they provide an outstanding service. They do it all for you. You don't really have to worry, and you get a very well-working, tailor-made solution. So this can actually be quite an interesting alternative as well. So it really depends a little bit on the use case, right? Also, when we look at the total cost of ownership of these things, then standard connectors are much faster to implement. They are much cheaper. On the other hand, you have less flexibility. So here, basically, if you compare the options, then standard connectors and white label partnership, the wiring has already been done by the vendors. So you really have maybe some higher licensing cost, but from an implementation, operation, and innovation perspective, the costs are significantly lower than with all the other first two options here, right? So keep that in mind when you make those evaluations. And then basically assessing vendors on how robust they are. And basically, first of all, when you look at your existing HR ecosystem today, at the HR solutions that you have in place, what are your future priorities? Where do you need to improve, really? How fit for purpose is your current HR tech? Those are some of the questions on this slide that you can ask to understand more about the current situation at your organization. And sometimes this means that you have a line across, different departments, different functions within HR. So making that alignment, we at Fosway have several alignment tools that would help you actually to then do it and also visualize it and present that to stakeholders and to kind of see, for example, where some parts of your HR technology stack are actually not as fit for purpose as they should be. And then you can, with maybe an assessment of your future priorities and areas of disruption, you can make a call as to, how do you evolve your HR technology landscape. So I think that's an important point. And when you do this, then you can ask the questions to your vendors, like how can they support me with my future priorities? Do they have partner solutions already in their marketplace, maybe that you can just activate for whatever background checks, for video interviewing and those kind of things? Do they have even multiple solutions per category? So would it be easy for me to switch my assessment provider from A to B, or would that be a hassle-some and costly project, right? So how sophisticated are the integrations? Are they just maybe taking only 3 or 4 kind of data fields, very basic, or are they really sophisticated integrations, where payroll data is transferred, and then you do a compensation review, and then once you have that finished, you update the payroll system automatically. So there's a lot of those kind of things that you need to understand really today to make those vendor decisions in a good way. Because at the core, these solutions have come closer together, and they really differentiate themselves more on their ability to integrate and work with one another. Yeah, so I think that's, looking at the time, maybe it from my side.
Right.
should we maybe open it up for questions, do you think?
Yeah, please. Thanks,
David?
Sven. And we have had some come through already. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask Sven or Megan, anyone in the audience, please just use the chat or questions function in the webinar control panel. To start off, somebody's asked sort of how technical do I or my team need to be to connect HR with other solutions in the ecosystem? We'll start with you, Sven.
Yeah, so there are solutions out there where you don't have to be very technical at all. You only need to enter an API key, basically a key, and then you just need to activate the integration on both sides. So it can actually be quite easy, but it requires a highly sophisticated integration from the vendor side. If you go down that other route, then it's good to have a bit of a technical understanding on how the data is flowing across those systems and what to look for. So then you are looking at maybe an HR IT function who can support you with that usually.
Yeah, and you're right. It does depend on the type of integration, Megan. I know with our identity and background checking tool and Experian, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, there is absolutely no technical requirement from the customer's point of view to actually get that working. It's just functionality that we can provide through our system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to add that on, that actually with regards to those kind of integrations and what Cipher can offer, it's actually you don't need to be technical, but you do need to have total clarity on what you're expecting or wanting from an integration. So what does it look and feel like for a user, for you as the HR team, for people within your team? That's what you need to have total clarity on and really think about, and sort of let then your providers be the experts with regards to the technical aspects, I would advise.
Great. Thank you. Megan, someone else has asked sort of a bit more information about how Cipher integrates with different partners. I think we've already touched on it, perhaps, but just the different styles of integration that Sven mentioned. Is it purely API connectivity that Cipher offer?
Well, because we've been doing integrations and best of breed for such a long period of time that we've sort of gone through that whole transformation ourselves. So with regards to sort of more legacy or older integrations, obviously they did used to be sort of by flat file or CSVs, most commonly used for things like payroll is how people would typically interact there. But looking forwards, and I think a lot of what Sven's focus has been on is actually about the future, how you want your systems to work, what you see either as you grow or evolve, or new requirements that you're going to have, and for that to be agile and flexible, that's why we focus on APIs really, from a Cipher point of view. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Somebody has asked how you create. Actually goes back to your point about the ecosystem, Sven. How do you actually create, or what are you looking for to ensure that you have an ecosystem, a habitat that's sort of ripe for digital transformation and connectivity?
Yeah, so I mean, it's understanding your requirements in the first place, where you want to go, and then basically you can look at the vendor options for the high priority things, and for, like I said, for the different habitat, if you want to call it that, different strategies or types of solutions are probably a little bit higher on the list. So at Fosway, we have these 9 grids, which is basically putting the market into 9 zones. And a lot of us are trained to always look top right, because that is how maybe some US analysts are kind of seeing and using some other tools. And also our 9 grid portfolios in HR train us to do that. But the Fosway 9 grid model really there's value in every zone. So depending on your habitat, your ecosystem, the type of organization that you are, you might actually not want to look top right, but you might actually find that some vendors from other zones are actually a much better fit to your type of organization, and also then probably to the underpinning requirements. So I think that's definitely something where you can ask for advice, of course. And Fosway is definitely able to help here. But generally speaking, I would say, understand your needs and align those very well. And then it's probably much easier to find a suitable solution to meet those needs, and also then make those decisions in a much easier and faster way.
Thank you. And actually that feeds into a question we've received, Megan, which is one for you. It's from an existing customer of Cipher's. They've asked just to talk a little bit about the process of how we would go about supporting an integration between one of our solutions and a third-party system.
Yeah, that was a really good question. Initially very collaboratively, so we would really want to engage with both the customer and that third party. Really coming back to that people strategy, what are you trying to achieve by an integration, and what does integration look like to you? And then essentially really going and working with that third party and understanding then the technical aspects of how we can make those objectives happen, how closely we can make it, hopefully, you know, everything, but really it's about understanding collaboratively what they're looking for, and then sort of technically going and sort of scoping and building something and proposing this is how we do it.
And I think that's right. I think that that's just related to how flexible, how configurable the APIs enable you to be, that so much needs to be invested up front in just understanding the need and scoping it out from there.
Yeah, especially if it's kind of like a first kind of integration or project that an organization would have done in this way, which a lot of organizations in that mid-market space are. So yeah, it's about kind of supporting where we can and using the technology to achieve that people strategy that our customers are sort of obviously building and implementing.
Great, thank you. Well, look, sadly, we're out of time, but thank you very much, Sven, for your presentation, and Megan, thank you for all your help with the polls and the Q&A session as well. For everyone still on the call, I really would highly recommend that you visit the Fosway website and have a look at their 9-grid analysis for Cloud HR. We'll include a link in our follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. It really is an excellent overview of the mid-market and enterprise vendors in the HR space in the UK and Europe. If anyone would like to discover more about Cipher and how our HCM solutions can connect you to your people data, please visit our website, ciphr.com, which is ciphr.com. And there will be a short survey when you exit the webinar. If you can spend a couple of seconds just providing your responses, it just helps us improve our webinars in the future. So please do take a moment to fill it in. Thanks again for joining us today. And I do hope to see you at another one of our webinars in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.